Hello, and welcome to this webinar from AGC Biologics. My name is Kira Mills from Samba Scientific, and I'll be the moderator for this session. The field of pharmaceutical development and technology transfer is experiencing rapid changes, making strategic agility essential for organizations to succeed. Navigating this environment effectively is a key focus for many in the industry. We are pleased to have Watson Netto, Director of Process Transfer and Validation at AGC Biologics in Copenhagen, as our expert speaker today. Watson leads a substantial team dedicated to ensuring seamless technology transfer and validation activities, enabling the transition of processes from development to large-scale manufacturing. With a background in biological engineering and a PhD in bioprocessing technology, Watson brings a wealth of expertise, particularly in downstream processing. The title of today's presentation is Balancing Speed, Quality, and Digital Transformation. In this presentation, Watson will explore the key challenges and opportunities for CDMOs. He will delve into global CDMO strategy, the necessity of scale flexibility, and the critical balance between speed and quality. Furthermore, the presentation will highlight the role of digitalization and technology transfer, including innovations like electronic batch records that are reshaping process development. Now, I'll turn it over to Watson.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So welcome to this webinar. In today's presentation, we are going to explore, as you mentioned, some of the key challenges that CDMO face throughout the project lifecycle, especially how to strike the right balance between quality and speed, or what kind of role digital transformation can play in making that balance not just possible, but even powerful. And I will do this by focusing on three key questions. The first one is, how can CDMOs adapt to a rapidly changing client demand? This could be changed in project scope, timeline, or simply a scale. Then the second question is how to balance the speed and quality during manufacturing process. Then finally, I'll be discussing a little bit about what role does digital transformation play in the future of process development, tech transfer, and manufacturing. So starting with the first question, how can CDMOs adapt to a rapidly changing client demand? In order for us to answer this question, we actually need to look into what kind of feature the clients seek in a CDMO. Firstly, they are looking for a seamless technology transfer. This is especially important for already developed projects, projects like late-stage or commercial projects that are in a certain advanced stage of development. Those projects are already filed with different authorities. So for the CDMO, it's very important that the CDMO that, for the clients, it's very important that CDMO that they select is able to transfer the project in with little or less changes as possible. From the CDMO point of view, what they can do is to actually employ the experienced tech transfer team that can onboard those projects, but also to use tools and templates that can facilitate the technology transfer process, and also use the deliverable trackers to make sure that no deliverables are unaccounted for. The second point is that clients are looking for a partner to manufacture and to develop their drug. And this is very important because several clients, they are looking for CDMO for the long-term relationship. A CDMO that is able to onboard the project all the way from clinical and take it all the way to commercial stage. And the CDMO, what they can do to show to the client that they are the right partner is by, again, making available the experienced R&D and manufacturing team, but also by showcasing the state-of-the-art facility. And I think more important than that, CDMO must have or need to have flexibility in order to adapt to changes in the client demand and in the project scope, but also to have a customer-centric approach. The third point is the timeline. The timeline is in the center of many discussions with the clients, and that discussion starts way before the projects are actually signed. Already at the proposal stage, the clients are looking at different timelines and how fast can the CDMO offer slots in manufacturing, for example. And then for the clients, it's therefore very important that the CDMO they select is able to commit to the timelines that they promise, because the clients on their hand, they have commitments with their own stakeholders, and more importantly, they have patients that are waiting for those life-saving drugs. So what the CDMO can do in many cases, CDMOs could have accelerated programs, special programs designed for specific type of proteins, for example. This would be something that would fit some projects and some clients. On the other hand, different solutions on the line, for example, could help the CDMO offer attractive timelines. Things like, for example, the use of single-use technology. This will allow for fast batch preparation and also fast facility changeover. And this will have an important impact on the timeline and also the ability of the CDMO to offer time slot in manufacturing for the client. More important, the timeline is actually the ability of that CDMO to deliver on what they promise. The CDMO can offer a very attractive timeline to the client, but if they're not able to manufacture in a flawless manner, then that serves of no use to the client. So it's very important, of course, that there's a dedicated team in charge of the project, a team that goes all the way from supply chain, SMEs to quality, MSAT, process development, and so on, but also the use of project management tools. It goes in line with what I mentioned before, things like, for example, the deliverable tracker. Any tool that can be used to actually make sure that the project is following the right step for the stage that the project is in. And then doing manufacturing, it's also important to look for any opportunity that can make the process more agile and therefore decrease the risk for errors on the line. So we look, or the CDMO should always look into continuous improvement of the process itself, and it makes it easier for them to produce batch after batch with little or less mistakes. And then what could be really a cherry on top of the cake? That would be the use of digital solutions. Things like electronic batch record. This would allow the CDMO to manufacture with very little error or to reduce drastically the error during the production. And this could have a huge impact on the project execution. And finally, skill flexibility. This one goes very in hand with the partnership that I mentioned earlier. If it's important for the client to see that the CDMO is able to accommodate their project demand when that demand happens, it's important then for the CDMO to have actually a wide range of scales that they can offer the client. Because many times when the client sign with us, they don't have the full overview of how or what the skill they're going to need on the 5 years or 10 years down the line. So it's important for the client that the CDMO they selected is able to accommodate the scale change as it goes during the project lifetime. And another thing that one can do as well to keep that flexibility in check is to scale out instead of scaling up. And I have a slide in which I'll try to explain what I mean by that. What we see here is a representation of a large-scale mammalian manufacturing process. This is the upstream part of the process where we see the shake flask, the C train, and then the cell expansion all the way to the 2,000-liter bioreactor. So the main bioreactor here is 2,000 liter, and this is where where the main fermentation takes place. In this case, the 500-liter scale is used to inoculate the 2,000 liter. This is what we call a one-pack process, so one time 2,000 liter. If this is the scale that we initially contracted with the client, and then if the demand change, for example, to 4,000-liter scale, we can do two things. One is to add a 4,000-liter bioreactor, so to scale up. But this requires that we go back to R&D to find the right parameters in order to support the cell growth and to basically achieve the right balance between the cell growth and to get the right parameters. Another thing that we can do, because again we are already manufacturing 2,000-liter scale, we can add 2 additional 2,000-liter scale, so 4,000-liter scale. And in this case, because it's exactly the same size of the bioreactor that we already have, means that we have exactly the same parameters. And this allows us to skip the R&D step altogether. And this can be done all the way, in the case of AGC, all the way up to 6-pack, which means 6 times 2,000 liters bioreactor. It can also be configured as a 2-pack, 3, 4, 5, and as I mentioned, 6. So to have this flexibility becomes very important for the client, because not only the CDMO then becomes able to grow in scale as the client demand for scale increase, but also the other way around. If they are doing 4,000-liter scale and suddenly they don't need that anymore, we can easily go back to 1-pack, so 2,000-liter scale. Now, moving on to the second question, how to balance speed and quality in manufacturing process. This balance is a very important one because on one hand, we have quality and we never compromise on the quality. So we want to be able to keep the data traceability. You want to be able to continue producing in a GMP compliant manner. And then, as I mentioned before, the flawless execution becomes very important. On the other hand, our clients expect a fast track from R&D to production. They expect a fast batch preparation and facility changeover. And then once the batch is manufactured, they expect that the release is done as fast as possible, instead of having the drug substance sitting in the storage, consuming expiry date. So a way to keep this balance in check is to have first, as I mentioned, a quality mindset by simply manufacturing executing the process with a quality mindset will allow us to actually ensure that the timeline and the speed is organically generated as part of the process. And secondly, to have a robust quality system, so to have clear procedures for handling deviations, CAPAs and change control, and to have integrated quality system that perhaps can be shared and used across the network, allowing other sites and other departments to learn with mistakes. These are things that can allow the CDMO to have continuous improvement on the procedure, and therefore, again, keep this quality versus speed balance in check. People are, of course, important part of the entire process. So to have experienced and well-trained people will ensure that we are producing the right first-time manner. And then finally, innovation and technology. Any tool that can be used to improve information flow while maintaining or enhancing quality will play an important role in keeping this balance. And with this, I got to the third part of this presentation, the digital transformation part. So what role does digital transformation play in the future of process development, tech transfer, and manufacturing? In the past years, the use of AI has increased a lot. AI is used in several different kind of industry. Our industry is not exception. At AGC, we have developed our own internal AI chatbot. And then what I've done, actually, have placed that same question to that chatbot. And then the answer, or the short version of a much extended answer it gave me, reads something like digital transformation can drive great efficiency, reduce costs, enhance compliance, and shorter time to market across the entire life cycle. But this is one part, only one section, only of all the potential that digital transformation can have in a business like ours. Again, as I mentioned, the use of data analytical and AI can be used to help identify process inefficiencies, predict outcomes, optimize process flows, and even do complex analytical analysis of data. But also we could use simulation tools, digital tools that can mimic parts of the process, will allow us to do testing in silico, so reducing the time that is needed for physical trials in the lab, and therefore accelerate the development cycle, for example. In terms of documentation, any system that allows us for moving from paper-based to a more digital environment will have an important role as well. So centralized digital repositories, for example, to ensure seamless access to technical documents, reduce errors and delays during batch preparation. Also allow communication between different departments and also between maybe the CDMO and the client itself. The use of predictive maintenance, for example, this could be a very interesting area to have sensors or AI to predict equipment failures before they occur. This would minimize disruption and maybe even extend the equipment lifespan. And then finally, we could also consider the use of tools in supply chain in order to improve the visibility of the materials, enable better inventory management, and even maybe do some demand forecasting. Next slide, I will be talking about two examples of using digital transformation at AGC. The first one is a tailor-made electronic laboratory notebook that is used on the development lab. And the second one is an off-the-shelf digital twin that we tested on the tech transfer department. Starting with the electronic laboratory notebook, what we see on top is a flow of a typical experiment planning in the lab. So the scientists will plan the experiments on the paper, then they will draft this protocol on a Microsoft Word, for example. Then they would print the protocol for the technicians who would execute on the lab, take notes directly on the paper. And then the scientists will come, take that paper, manually extract the information from the protocol into Excel for data analysis. And perhaps a second software is needed to have a more complex analysis of the data. By implementing electronic laboratory notebook, we have replaced this entire step into one single function. So the big wins that we obtained by doing that is that the planning of experiment and the protocols are in one place, but also analytical data is incorporated directly into the tool because the analytical department also have access to the laboratory notebook, so they're able to report the results directly into the step where it matters. Calculations are, of course, performed automatically, which helps a lot with error prevention. And then the Excel is altogether replaced with a centralized data storage system, data that can be accessed by different teams as relevant it becomes. The tool allow or enable powerful analytical visualization, and then in the end, altogether allow achieve of dramatic time saving. And this example, as I mentioned, is for R&D area. The same can be done, of course, for manufacturing area, GMP area, with a different complexity. Because in that case, we'll be talking about electronic batch record, and of course, for CDMO, considering the multiple number of different molecules that CDMOs operate with, then the complexity is in a different level. But nonetheless, the kind of gains and savings would be similar to what we see here for the R&D area. The second example, as I mentioned, is a digital tool that is used to mimic part of the process. So this is a digital twin. This software is called SuperPro Designer. And what we have done, we have mapped our entire process, one of our commercial projects, into this tool. And this is done by basically extracting data from batch records and put them in this tool. And then what we can do afterwards is different simulations. We can easily scale up and scale down the process, make a very quick generation of bill of materials, do economic analysis, and have a really in-depth understanding of the process mass balance. So this is the kind of setup that we use if we want to look into where are the bottlenecks in the process, where can we gain, where can we improve. And because the process of setting it up is so lengthy, this is not the kind of thing that you would do for every single project, but maybe for a more strategic project where you want to understand better or want to look for where you can improve in the process, this would be an excellent tool to be used. And like this one, there are other simple, more simple tools, for example, to scale up and scale down specific steps like chromatography step or the upstream step. And those are all digital solutions that have a huge impact in the biological manufacturing. In conclusion, to be able to meet client demands and ensure a good balance between speed and quality, the CDMO must enhance its technological and digital capabilities. This will allow them to increase the productivity and increase success rate. They must ensure that the team is well trained and experienced. As I mentioned, the team is an important part of our business. This will allow them to prevent errors and operate in the right first-time manner. And finally, the CMO must invest in a flexible and scalable technology. This will allow them to adapt to different scale requirements throughout the project lifetime and also increase the service portfolio. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Watson, for a great presentation. We have some questions to ask you now about your discussion. So our first question is, do you need to choose quality or speed to focus on, or can these actually complement each other?
That's actually a very good question. And I think I tried to explain in my presentation. So quality must come first, right? So I think when CDMOs operate with a strong quality mindset, speed naturally follows. Few errors, few deviations, and also few repeated batches lead to a faster and more reliable process. I think the real advantage actually lies in the synergy between the two, between quality and speed. By simply embedding quality into the daily operation, the project timeline can accelerate organically. But on the other hand, if we prioritize the output at the expense of quality, it might increase the yield in the short term, but often result in unusable product, cost delays, or even regulatory setbacks. So it's a balance that is kept by simply having quality, quality in mind when manufacturing.
Our next question is, how can these digital solutions change the processes for BLA approvals?
The BLA biological license application in US, in Europe, it would be marketing authorization application, is a process that is heavily dependent on data. So a lot of data is compiled and needed to be assembled for the BLA process. So the use of electronic tools like electronic laboratory notebook, as I mentioned, or electronic batch record really can help with the data assembly part. So it saves a lot of time with that process. But also, I think traditional paper-based records could often or could delay the BLA submission process, often due to missing documentation or due to manual review of inconsistencies. So these tools would basically allow us to do this process much faster, and therefore would facilitate the BLA process altogether. Yeah.
Definitely. So what do you see as the next set of hurdles that might be solved with digital tools in the future?
Hmm. There are several things that can still be done, right? I mentioned earlier a little bit about a shared database for the clients. For example, right now we have still a lot of data that are siloed. Maybe development team has a repository for data, manufacturing has another one, and client then probably needs to switch some data. And what we would do manually is to extract these different data and then probably supply them via email. I think database that could be accessed by our client would be actually very powerful thing. But also we could think, for example, of using AI to do more, maybe preventive deviation handling rather than reactive. Right now, deviation happened, and then we're going to handle it. Maybe if we could use AI to actually look at the trend, how a manufacturing process is going, and then maybe try to predict that we might be going towards a problem there. This is something that would be really also powerful on the process. Then we have things like a lot of manual process that we have, things like continuous process verification, for example, which is something that we do for validated projects. We need to take data from the batch records and then plot them and then put them some kind of control charts. If that could be automated, that also would be a very powerful feature. Yeah, and then release by a smart release, for example, using the electronic batch record. Right now, whenever we're done with manufacturing, scientists for manufacturing quality need to check one by one every little step on the batch record. Using electronic batch record, that step becomes all automated, and then QA intervention would be really minimal. So I think those would be one of the biggest gain using digital tools.
Definitely. So what is the biggest roadblock companies face when they're trying to implement these processes?
There are several. I think start with culture. We have done this for many years without this new fancy tool. Why do we need to have this fancy tool? I think this is the first one. And of course, when you are in that stage, you'll have a lower user adoption. And then as a consequence, you're going to have a system that maybe is not used to its potential. But there's also a lot of legacy tools. When you try to implement a new system, perhaps already exists 5 other different systems to do 5 different things. And then maybe you attempt to integrate those things, that can be a little bit complex to do that. You might have data that, as I mentioned before, that are siloed into different systems, and it can be really complex to overcome that. The cost also plays an important role there. If you think of things like electronic batch record, where the return on investment, takes many years to actually come. I think the initial investment that you have to do can be also a drawback and can pull, can be a reason for many companies not to go in that direction. There could also be fears of regulatory impact, not understanding how could this tool be validated, for example. This also, in the end, could lead that many solutions are not coming out of the draft part. I think we could also have cases where whenever we want to implement a new system, we look inwards to see in the company who can do this, who we think have the right skill. But often those are not the right people to do it alone. Maybe they might need special consultants to do that. And the risk of using just internal people is that we might end up with a poor system, or the system that will have a poor design and a poor execution. I think those would be it. Maybe if I can add one more, I think also in case of electronic batch record, still, when we think of the complexity of for CDMO, in our case, for example, in Copenhagen, we have more than 34 active projects. So if we are implementing electronic batch record, we want a system that is actually able to adapt to more than 34 different projects. So then becomes, all different level of complexity. So the approach there would be maybe to look into some kind of model approach where you can model instead steps rather than projects, and then to have science staff towards to build those modules to compose the project. So it's complex, and that per se could be a reason to make the CDMO not even try to adventure in that direction.
Yeah, it's a lot of good points. Besides the six-pack system you mentioned earlier, does AGC Biologics have any other programs or systems to help speed up production schedules?
Well, we do employ, as I mentioned earlier, we do use single-use systems, but also as I mentioned earlier, we have accelerated program or special programs that are designed for specific type of protein. For example, we have a program called Age Accelerate, which is a program that guarantees like 1 kilo of IgG1 protein in 11 months at a fixed price. And that's 11 months from DNA transfection to the drug substance release. So this program, for example, is perfect for IgG1 protein, because what we do, we use our production platform using raw materials that we have in stock, and then this allows us to be able to offer this attractive timeline, right? But then for every other protein that doesn't qualify for this, we still need to look into different ways of accelerating the program. Because, for example, we cannot accelerate things like cell growth. They need to take the time that they take, right? And the raw materials, the same thing. We can try to be proactive and then order them right already at the signature stage of the program. However, the vendors still have the upper hand into deciding when they can supply these raw materials or not. So I think for all other cases, we try different solutions to be able to offer attractive timeline. But otherwise, if a client is coming with IgG1 protein, I think this Age Accelerate would be the right program that I would recommend for them.
Definitely. And our last question is in relation to scale flexibility. You talked about scaling out instead of scaling up. Can you briefly highlight the advantages of scaling out instead?
Yeah, sure. So both have advantage, right? It really depends what kind of process you have, and then you can decide what option to go for. But if you think of equipments, for example, when you scale up, you need to use large equipment. The example I gave before, if you are having a 2,000 liter process and I need to scale up to 4,000 liters, then you need to increase the bioreactor size. On the other hand, if you're scaling out, you're not increasing the bioreactor size, but you're adding additional 2,000 liter scale. So you will occupy space on the line, but it's a different kind of issue. And then you need to look into what space you have available and then what kind of process you have. In terms of timelines, for example, the use of scaling up could take a longer time. As I mentioned, often it requires that we go back to R&D to get the right parameters for the cell growth, for aeration, and so on. And then when you scale out, the timeline can be shorter because you skip all these steps, and then you can simply replicate the scale that you already have with the same process parameters. In terms of costs, it also looks different. When you scale up, you're looking into more upfront investment. On the other hand, when you're scaling out, so when you're adding multiple 2,000 liter bioreactors, in our case, you have higher operational costs because sadly you need to use more people on the line to handle different equipment simultaneously. You might have more costs associated with electricity and so on. And also in terms of scale flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, scaling out gives you more flexibility because for you to scale up and down, or for you to increase and decrease the scale by just adding or removing the 2,000 liter bioreactor, it's easier than doing that with scaling up, right? Increasing the scale of your bioreactor. So I think all in all, you'd use a scale up when the long-term demand is predictable and is high. And then when the process can be optimized for large-scale production without compromising the quality. But scaling out, you would use when the demand is uncertain or they fluctuate because you want to be able to go up and down. Or when speed to market is critical, and then when process is sensitive to change in the scale, makes it much easier for you to just, again, replicate the scale that you already know, that works fine.
Definitely. So those are all of the questions we have for today. So with that, we will conclude today's webinar. Thank you again, Watson, for sharing your expertise. We hope everyone watching found this session informative and valuable. Thanks.
Thank you.